Hello, this video is going to talk about the isCOBOL debugger. isCOBOL's runtime framework includes this graphical debugger, and it's launched by adding a -D to your command line. It works both in fat and thin client, and any class compiled for debug will open in the debug window. Now, to compile for debug, you have two choices. -D is the standard compile switch, and it includes debug information in your class. -DX adds extended debug functionality. It includes all the variables in the class, even those that aren't used in the program, and it will let you jump over or skip portions of the code. Now, as you run your debugger session, your settings and option choices are automatically saved in a properties file, and they'll be used in each of your future sessions. This properties file is saved in your user's home directory, and it's called isDebugger.properties. If you want to change the location or the name of the file, use the configuration variable isCOBOL.debug.prop file. Now, another file is created to save the debug session settings specific to the program that you're debugging. It includes breakpoints, monitored and watched variables, and some of the other things that you set. This file has a .isd extension, and by default, it's saved in the same folder as the class, and it uses the name of the first program that is run. If you want to customize the path or the name of this file, you can do that from Settings in the debugger and then Session. You'll probably need to do this if you share a development area with other users. Otherwise, your settings would get overwritten by the next developer running that program in debug. Now, prior to 2020 R2, the source code that was used when debugging a program had to be available in a separate file, and you had to set isCOBOL.debug.code prefix to point to the location of that separate file. In 2020 R2, the source code is included when you compile with -D or -DX, so you no longer need that debug code prefix. If you want to keep the source code separate as it was in earlier versions, you can set isCOBOL.debug.embeddedSource to false. Note in these screenshots how much bigger the debug compiled programs are than the top Hello World class that's not compiled for debug. Besides that larger size, you can tell if your class has been compiled for debug by running iscrun --info. That will report important information about the class, including if it's compiled for debug and if the DX flag was used. In this screenshot, you can see that the isControlSet.class is compiled for debug, and I use the -DX compile flag, and the -D was added automatically because I used the DX. Just a side note here, it also includes the isCOBOL compiler and required runtime build numbers. You can see a list of the build numbers and their versions in the knowledge base article number 271. So let's go take a look at the debugger. So I'm going to run our sample isControlSet in the debugger. And I've run the iscrun-info on it so that you can see that I compiled it with a DX. So this is how we start the debugger with a -D. And here's the debugger. There are multiple ways to do tasks in the debugger. One of them is the menu. For instance, you can see under Run, you can start the session here. Another is a function key combination, like Control and F6. We also have buttons on the toolbar that we'll talk about in a little bit, the command area, and you can type Help in here to get a list of the commands that you can execute in the command prompt. I'm going to start with Run. So we'll run and start the debug session, and then I'm going to type an S and press Enter, and that will step. And if I press Enter again without putting anything else into the command area, it will repeat that last command, that S. So I can just step through by pressing Enter. Let's look at the different areas in the debugger. We've talked about the menu bar and the toolbar. Here's the source code area, then the output area that'll give you information for each step or task that you take, the command area, the variables area, both the variables that are on the current line and any watched variables that we set up. And then the information area with all of the different tabs for perform stack, our monitors, our breakpoints, different threads. The command history is a history of everything that you've typed into the command area so that you don't have to type it again. You can just double click. And then anything that would output to the console would go here. Up on the toolbar, this button will continue the program. Just run it. And the pause is here. We have a button to step, one to step but not go into the perform, so it'll step over the perform. This one will step out of the current paragraph. This one will step out of the program or go to the end of the program. This one goes to the cursor. So if I put my cursor here and run to cursor, goes there. This one will go to the beginning of the next program. This is an auto step. You can set the speed here, faster or slower. Now, in addition to the yellow arrows, we also have a set of blue arrows over here. The blue arrows are only active when you've compiled with a DX, and they do actions similar to the yellow ones, except that the code that it skips over doesn't get executed. In the source code window, I can highlight and copy any text to the clipboard. I can display the value of an item by double-clicking on it. So W font name down here is Tahoma. Or I could hover over it, like W font size. It'll tell you information about the variable as well as the value. If you want to jump to a paragraph name, you just click on it, and it'll take you right to that paragraph. If you want to go back to where you were, you use this button here that will return you to the current line. Now, quite often you'll want to set a breakpoint, and there are several ways to do that depending on what kind of breakpoint you want. If you want to stop at the beginning of a program, the best way is to go down to the command area, type B for breakpoint, 0 for the first line, space, and then the name of the program. A quick way to set a breakpoint, if you are looking at where you want it to be set, is to click on the breakpoint column over here on the left. So if I click here, you see the circle, I've set a breakpoint. And you can see your breakpoints listed here on the breakpoint tab. So if I go, stopped at the breakpoint. The third way to set a breakpoint is to go up to the breakpoint menu screen. And this is good if you want to set a condition. For instance, if I wanted to check on this perform and I want it to stop here, but say I only want it to stop when I2 is the value of, let's say, 4. So let's set a breakpoint here at line 4318 on the condition that I2 is equal to 4. And then I can come up here to my arrow and just continue. And it stops on 4318 when the value I2 is 4. And so you can see on the current variables the value here. And again, my breakpoint is listed down below. Now there's another way to stop at a certain condition. So I'm going to turn these breakpoints off by unchecking the checkboxes. And I'm going to right-click on the screen and go to Quick Watch. And I want the variable I2. So there's quite a few things that you can do. You can show it in the watched variables, you can modify the value, or you can add a monitor. And that's what I want to do now, is add a monitor. The variable name is I2. I do want to enable this, and I want to tell me when the value is 7. And so here's my monitor, I2, and it is activated. And remember, now it's equal to 4. So I'm just going to go, and it stopped there again, and I2 is equal to 7. So that's another way to set a condition in your debugger and stop at that condition. We can also set watched variables. And let's do that. I'm going to go to Quick Watch. Again, I2, but this time I'm going to show in watched variables. And close, and here it is. And I want to look at the hex value of this. So I'm going to right-click and say Show Hex Values. There we go. A watched variable is perfect if you want to step through and look at the variable and watch its value change. So I want to look at I2, but it's already at 7. So I'm going to stop the program with the X there, and then I'm going to start the debugger session. Now I want to stop at that same location, 4318, and we'll set a breakpoint. Now I'm going to continue the run with this arrow, and it stopped here, and I2's value is 1. All right, so now we'll step through, and I'll click down and type S, and it goes to, you see the value is changing to 3. You could also get the hex value of your monitor. I'm going to click on it, and the little pencil is Edit, by checking this checkbox. And now we have the hex value instead of the ASCII value. All right, so let's stop this now. I'm going to type quit and then exit. And I want to run this in the thin client. So I'll start the server, bring up another window, and we'll run isc client -d so that I can open it and debug. The only thing I added was the -d to the command line. There are some customizations that you can make to the debugger. If you go up to Settings and Customize, let's change the color of our breakpoint column. So here's the breakpoint column, my color. Let's change it to green. Apply it. Yeah, that looks okay. So I'm going to close that. Now if I were to exit the debugger and run it again, that column is still the same color, and that's because it's keeping that color in the properties file that gets automatically created. So let's take a look at that properties file. In my user's home folder, I have an isDebugger.properties. Now open that up, and you'll see when we look at the breakpoint column background color, this is the color for that green, and that's where it's saving that. If you deleted this file, the next time you start the debugger, it will automatically create it with the default values. Now the other thing that it's kept is my monitors and my breakpoints and my watched variables, and that's in the session file. Under Settings and Session, I've checked Save Session automatically, and I've given it a custom name and location. So in my ctemp, I have an MP Session 1. Let's look at that one. Here's my MP Session 1 in ctemp, and here's what that file looks like. It's got my breakpoints, my monitors, my watched variables, etc. And again, if you delete this file, it'll create a new one. And that's an overview of the isCOBOL GUI Debugger. I hope you give it a try. If you have any questions, you can reach us at support@variant.com. Thank you.